Technology is the tool set. Ultimately, change management, people and process is generally the hardest bit about a digital transformation. The tool set may need enhancing, adapting, which is one aspect of it, but it's also from an internal perspective, it's the people and process that they have to go through. And what we've seen is that people and organizations can make those changes a lot quicker than they ever used to, but it's exceptionally important to ultimately get it right. So, what we've seen is how we can work very closely with customers to get all aspects, working.
Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingser. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Today's guest is Mark Gausden, Vice President at Oracle EMEA JAPAC. Mark has spent most of his career in hospitality and technology. We talk about how Oracle is helping operators across the globe to digital transform their companies and making sure they get a high return of investment. According to Mark, the pandemic has had a huge change on how we do business and the way people buy and consume food, which have forced many operators to digitalize faster than ever, just due to the challenge around no contact between staff and customers. Mark gives some great examples about how leading operators are transforming their operations with tech at the center, and mentioned that many will not go back and operate as they did, which can be a win for both employees and customers short and long term. He believes that the coming 12 to 18 months will be very hard, but he has hope for the operators that have and will continue to innovate and keep this ship afloat. But before you tune in, why not sign up to our Maverick community newsletter and get great insights and leadership tools at hospitalitymavericks.com. We all need to go through this together, so happy to talk with you about your challenges, so please book a chat with me on hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you did not get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. There are many great nuggets and advice in here for any leader, so tune in and enjoy. Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast show. And today we're going to be exploring a subject that we have touched upon a couple of times during the pandemic, and actually a lot of times because it's so relevant, and it's digital transformation. It's actually a lot of businesses in the hospitality industry. You are now driven by tech, and tech is the center of it. And this transformation is becoming so incredible important as we move forward, but also it brings up a lot of new challenges. And for this conversation, I've been very lucky to be connected with Mark Gausden from Oracle. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Michael. Delighted to be here talking to you today about obviously a topic that is on everyone's minds at the minute.
Mark, for people that doesn't know who you are, can you just give them a bit of an elevator pitch about who Mark is, but also what is Oracle all about, and what is your role in the restaurant and food industry?
So I think today I run the business for Oracle Food and Beverage that covers Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also Australia and New Zealand. So quite a broad responsibility. I think I'd like to also share is how I kind of got into the industry, and I've been around for about 25 years now, and it all started in a small coffee house in Tunbridge Wells, where I was a waiter in a little restaurant, a coffee house, called Zapata's. And I remember leaving my first shift there and thinking that, this is an industry where, you're working, you're serving customers who are there enjoying themselves. And really from that point forward, it was an industry that I felt that I would definitely be, certainly wedded to for a long time in the future. And, from that, I went into operations, worked for, customers, or companies, KFC, Slug and Lettuces, a few freeholds to name a few. Really it was, I did that. And then I think it was probably about 12 years ago, where Mike Cross, which is, what some people will be more familiar with Oracle Food and Beverage, effectively came and asked me if I'd come and work for them. And really, I've not looked back since then. Oracle came and bought that business in 2014, I think now, Michael. From then, it's been a journey, somewhat transitioning the businesses and leveraging, all the Micros history that we built, and obviously bringing in all the benefits and great tech advantages that Oracle brings. And I think it's also important to note that whilst Oracle's a large organization, we have a dedicated industry focus for food and beverage. So it kind of sits within its own P&L within Oracle, as do many of our other, industries that we focus on, whether that's retail, communications, construction and engineering. Food and beverage has its own place within the organization.
What are the typical customers Oracle works with, and what kind of solutions are they buying from you?
Yeah, sure. So I think if we use hospitality, there's really kind of two ways we view hospitality. One is the hotel side of it, and the other is the food and beverage side of it. And whilst they have, whilst we have food and beverage in hotels, we kind of service, restaurants, in a separate business unit. Anywhere that doesn't kind of have a bed, falls into the food and beverage element of the global business unit. So typically within, the hotel side of the business, we serve hotels. Within the food and beverage side, it's anything from, stadiums, quick service restaurants, casual dining, table service restaurants. All of those aspects of food and beverage is kind of who our typical customers are.
During the pandemic, what have you seen that's happening, and how has this actually impacted you and your clients? What has been the journey?
So I think it goes without saying that the pandemic has kind of had a material impact on our industry as a whole. For having a kind of change in business focus and operations essentially overnight, to people protecting their life's work and livelihood of their employees. I think it's been a tremendous challenge for all of us. It's transformed the workplace. I think 100%, is kind of now home access across Oracle. And we've had to adapt to that change, manage lives, that kind of evolve around Zoom, kind of rely on tech at home to deliver daily business continuity, for our customers and our partners. So, I think, just from that perspective, it's had a material impact on kind of how we do business.
And what have you seen some of the challenges that has been with your customers? How have you seen that, and how have you been involved in maybe helping solving some of these challenges with your technology?
When obviously the pandemic hit, and everything shut down, I guess our first priority was to, go and talk to our customers. I mean, that was the first thing we did. And at the start, none of us, kind of really knew how fast or what it was going to look like when it was going to come back online. So, our role to play in this was, reaching out and saying, really, how can we help? And I think that, what we did was trying to work with our customers and look at how we could advance perhaps the technology stack that they had, today, to see what we could do to enable them to pivot channels, whether that's, was delivery, whether that was pickup, whatever channel that they needed to go and help, pivot their business on. We needed to kind of go make sure that, we enabled them to do that. So I think that, our first priority was kind of picking up the phone and seeing, how our customers needed some help for when they did reopen, how we could give them the technology platforms, to enable that.
And have you seen? I talked a bit about in the intro about the speed of digitalization that's happened over the last 6 to 7 months. Have you seen the same, where people have just moved their roadmaps so quicker than they actually originally thought? Because I always think that has this, as an operator or leader of a business, I've been there myself as a decision maker inside a hospitality business, you don't want to disrupt the customer's experience. So you think actually they are not ready for technology. But I think we've seen the opposite. People are so ready to use technology, and the pandemic have proven that. Have you seen that companies have just very quickly and rapidly expanded the tech stack in this period as well?
Yes, it's a great question. Certainly, Michael. I think that what we've seen is that our role to play, and what we try and get out of bed to do every day is really think ahead, is really provide technology that gives the customers, give customers the ability to go and do business, not only for what they want to do today, but also in the future, and prepare them for that future. And I think that, what we did was, I think what we tried to do was kind of go and reopen some of the conversations that we've been having for some time, because I think that at times we are all culpable of kind of not prioritizing certain things for the right reasons. But what we found was, there were things that we had talked about with our customers for a long time, but really it didn't hit the priority list at the top for, as I said, for generally good reasons. But we found very quickly that they wanted to turn it on there. So we had to be prepared to make sure that, we could, deploy the right, versions of the application, ensure that, the hardware, be it, in store, but also above store, worked with that. And then ultimately connected them to the partners that they needed in order to be able to go and deliver their product. And I think that was one of the biggest things that we saw. And it was, we were kind of prepared because we had been talking to a lot of our customers about this stuff, for a long time prior to the actual pandemic happening.
So within all this here during the pandemic, what is the biggest surprise you have had in all of this? What have you observed with your clients when it comes to digital transformation? What is like the one thing where you think, "Wow, I didn't see that come"?
I don't think it was necessarily a surprise, but I think that the rate and pace at which our industry worked together to deliver and kind of still operate in a pandemic in one of the hardest hit industries was, as I say, not a surprise, but it was fascinating to kind of see. We are, we're all very protective. A lot of us have been in this industry for a long time, and it's a language, it's in your DNA, and I think that a lot of us have worked in this industry for a very, very long time, and to see it hit as hard as we had, it was really refreshing to see, people come together in order to try and kind of find ways to work together. So I don't think it was a surprise necessarily, Michael, but I think it was refreshing to see how fast people were prepared to pivot their business priorities in order to be able to help ultimately their customers, our customers, and end users continue to do business.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It's incredible to see the amount of response and speed things has happened in the last 6 months. When you think about that, many probably also is on the edge of bankruptcy at the same time, or very uncertain about their future, but they just kept on grinding at it and put things in place. If you didn't do delivery, suddenly you did delivery. If you didn't communicate with your customer through certain channels, you suddenly did that overnight. And that innovation is probably one of the things we should grab out of this. I totally agree. What have you seen, like when you look at your customers? What are some of the things where you think, "Wow, that was really, really clever done," and they've used technology actually to, improve their businesses?
We've got a large ecosystem, in our industry, and I think that the ability to kind of go and pull together what's required to, serve certain channels has kind of been the first thing. But also in parallel to the tech side, it's been interesting to see how customers have changed some of their business models. I mean, who'd have thought necessarily we'd have been, buying coffees through subscription, for example. So I think it's I feel like that. Technology is ultimately the tool that is there to kind of help people deliver. So what we've seen is, customers, come to us and ultimately say, we need a certain percentage of our technology stack in order to be able to do serve this particular channel or this particular store in this way. But we've also seen a real appetite, on not just the tech side, but also, the more operational sides of how they've reacted, to kind of continue to do business in different ways.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting. There's been a lot of definitely transformation happening on the customer facing things just because of the need for contactless, doing delivery and so on. But actually, what I'm picking up as well now is there's a lot of businesses are now starting to look inside as well and see, okay, we've done this change, it's dramatically changed the way we operate, and we still need to continue that. And now they are focusing on optimizing internal infrastructures with technology, actually putting power on inside backwards, the back of house, as we call it as well in hospitality. Is that also something you're seeing, and any specific cases you maybe can reference in that connection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you take, we recently did a consumer dining survey, and if you think that, the 4 tech-enabled experiences that I'd like to reference that, we saw, view menu and order on a personal device was a key one. Being able to reserve tables in advance, on a personal device, contactless payment, whether that be, kind of kiosk or tablet, and ultimately paying on a personal device. So I think, there's no magic bullet, but I think that those are kind of some of the trends, that we've seen. And, I'll reference, you mentioned an example. If you just look at the likes of, Wagamamas, who are part of the TRG group, they were going to the lengths of being able to optimize their queuing system to actually, dine in at one point. And just things like that perhaps, they wouldn't have necessarily thought of as a priority, pre-pandemic. They kind of really looked at and worked out how they could improve that experience from their customers going in store. So we've seen lots of different ways of customers being creative, how they've optimized their kitchens, to handle multiple channels. That's one of the biggest aspects of change. When you're receiving orders from, in store, from pick up to delivery, how do you operationalize that in the back end? Be it, the production of food to your staff, all of those aspects have caused our customers to kind of ask questions of us, right, as a technology provider, but also ask questions of how, they themselves can also operationalize, themselves better to be able to handle that change.
When you're doing this change, and especially digital transformation, as I've tried myself through my career, and putting technology in place to help doing the heavy lifting, either for the customers or the employees or the managers, what are some of the key blockers you see for digital transformation? And maybe are some of them now disappearing because of our unique situation?
Yes, is the answer. I think some are going away. I think that the key to the blockers is really change management. I think, if we go back to what I previously said, technology is the tool set. Ultimately, change management, people and process is generally the hardest bit about a digital transformation. The tool set may need enhancing, adapting, which is one aspect of it. Which is where we try and help in whatever ways we can, but also it's also from a internal perspective, it's the people and process that they have to go through. And what we've seen is that people and organisations can make those changes a lot quicker than they ever used to, but it's exceptionally important to ultimately get it right. So what we've seen is how we can work very closely with customers to get all aspects, working. And a lot of customers have really opened up about their change management process internally for us to be able to work with them on that, which I think is also, key for us, and something that I've seen definitely change since this started. A lot more openness about, kind of organizations, because, we've needed that in order to kind of help deploy technology. I think there's been certain cases where, customers have not had a tech stack that's enabled them to be agile or do business in the way that they need to do in a pandemic. And ultimately, they've required a complete shift. And it's, ultimately, we get a call, and my team get a call, and it's like, how quickly can you implement this? And, what we say is, well, we might be able to implement it next week, but can you do that on your side? and ultimately, providing the tool is one aspect of it. So I think I'd say, they were, they're still blockers, but I think that what's happened is that they're not blockers anymore. It's just making sure that every box is ticked, and we've seen that people are prepared to do that a lot quicker in order to be able to, as I say, be agile and do business.
Yeah, because what I've observed myself is that often what I've seen when I've done digital transformation projects back from the early 2000s, it often was about getting it sticky out in the front line, getting the staff and the managers involved in using the technology in the right way. Because often the tool, there's nothing wrong with the hammer, is how you hold the hammer sometimes. And other knowledge about how you're holding the hammer. And I see often, 70% to 75% the project I've been involved in that didn't work, and that was because of the we didn't get that stickiness, or we had to go back and push again. And it's like any other thing you try to implement into your business, you really have to put it in the center of what you're doing, and don't think because it's technology it's just as simple as installing it and say, well, done, checkbox, out of the door. Let's move on to the next priority. And I observed the same as you, that that there's an openness, but again, there's how do you make it sticky out in front of winner, and how ready are you for that? Because this is like transforming the core of their business, as you said before. Like they have to work in a very different way as an organization as well, and change the principles towards that. Have you seen some of your clients really like taking their old model and say, let's throw everything up in the air and see how we can put it together in a different way of how they operated before?
Definitely, and I'd just like to kind of I'll come back to that in a second, but I think that just to kind of extend one of the points you were making there is, what we found at times pre-pandemic is that, people don't always like change. Businesses make a decision for sometimes reasons that perhaps aren't always obvious to the frontline teams, and it's always hard to kind of it's not always hard, but I think it's convincing organizations to change when people are the operators, the people on the front line, that are serving food and drink, etc., don't always see all those reasons. And I think because of the pandemic and the impact that it had on just the risk to jobs, the risk to livelihoods, the risk to actually doing business, ultimately what we've seen from people is that acceptance to, okay, we need to change because we need to make sure that we can do business in these times. So for us, I think that was kind of the shift that we saw, is that acceptance of crikey, we need to be able to change in order to just do business. And then to come on to your kind of latter question, I think that what we've seen, in upheaval is where we've had, and obviously what we do from our where we sit is we serve, tier 1 customers right through to tier 5, and where you have a tier 1 customer that has generally a very large infrastructure, there might only be pieces of that infrastructure you need to kind of remove and replace. And that's with those customers, we've kind of worked on that and focused on the real bits that are going to make a difference. There has been other customers that really have just not prioritized, the tool set, if you like, in order to do business, and they've just had something that's been in there for a decade, and actually there's no way that they can effectively, provide to all those channels I referenced earlier, whether that is pickup, whether that's delivery or whatever. So that's when we've had to develop our solutions in order to be able to, service people within a week. And I think that's been something we've had to adapt from our side. When we look at our roadmaps, when we look at our investment portfolio, the pandemic has had to adapt that, because we've needed to be able to deliver stuff to people very quickly, in order for them to kind of stay in business at times.
Yeah, so you have the full spectrum in principle that you have worked with, where somebody is starting from almost scratch, as you say, and to people that just have to get a couple of new spare parts into their vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's where this whole industry is very, it's it's very close to a lot of people's heart in the business because certainly it impacts everyone, but we're working with huge corporate organizations as well as people have built up their own independent single store that has taken them years and years to build. So really kind of our emotional ability to kind of work with all of that has been tested our side, because we've been working with these for a long time, and it's impacted them each, all of them in different ways. And I think that's been one of the challenges, myself and my team and our business has really kind of had to, adapt when the pandemic hit to a certain degree.
So when it comes to digital transformation or hospitality technology within the sector, what is the big next trend you see coming? Because now we are digitalized, I would say, in a certain degree. Most operators now have digitalized to a certain degree. What is the next big thing that's going to happen? What is the big bang when it comes to technology? What is it that you need to drive towards now?
I think the first thing I would say is kind of removing the kind of spaghetti topology. I think what we've found is that the next big thing from our side is ultimately what we've done in the pandemic is ultimately tried to enable, and what we've seen from customers is they've tried to enable everything, right? Very quickly in order to do business. And I think that what we're going to go and see is a refinement, of that topology of that, what they've got, with all the kind of on and off premise channels, the connections, the aggregators. I think that there is going to be, kind of a trend of kind of trying to simplify all of that, to ensure those consistency across all platforms. So I'd say that was certainly, kind of one trend I think we're going to see. I think, kind of short midterm, I think mobile, bring your own device, contactless everything. But the one I'd probably certainly say is kind of personalization. I think that people have generally become somewhat more loyal during their kind of during the lockdowns and stay at home, and I think we saw that in our survey stats. I think 1 in 3 said that they had become more loyal. So I think the areas of investment around loyalty, personalization is going to ultimately be exceptionally important to to our customers. Of course, new customer acquisition is important to everyone, but I do think there's going to be an added drive around loyalty. We could have a separate discussion about what loyalty means, but I think from a loyalty perspective, I think that's going to be key. And then I think longer term, I think connecting the back office to the front end experience, supply chain, inventory, real time buying, IoT. I think for me, that's kind of the mid to long term aspect of the trend.
Yeah, and that's where you get to the ultimative digitalization of the business, I guess, when you reach that stage where when you touch one thing, you can see it in live time that now a cost is moving or the projection of something is moving because something has happened somewhere in the business.
Yeah, and I think that exactly right. And I think that's something that has definitely been, been in as part of the conversations we have. People want, there's so much more data with the extended channels, with the extended ways to do business. As a technology provider, there is much more demand from us to be able to provide data that covers all of those channels. People want to see real time how many orders that they're getting through through delivery through one of the aggregators, so that they can help manage the workload in the kitchen based on the in-store capacity. So I think that the whole kind of data aspect around that full digitalization is definitely going to only accelerate, as to your point.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, because one of the things I always thought was challenging when I run multiple restaurant units was that some managers in some units was more experienced than others, so they had a better touch on what worked and didn't work. So it's a lot based on their experience, but also when you got a new manager into a new site, there was this catching up time about the learning the patterns of this place and understanding it. And because you didn't have any data in that kind of way and not enough data points, it often become a gut feel thing. And that's never good in any business decision to use your gut. You actually need to take the hardcore facts and make better decisions out of it. And I think that's one of the things that's going to be very interesting to see. How can you actually, shorten those periods for a new manager that comes into a restaurant to make better business decision in that place or in that unit for itself. And that's one of the things where I think digitalization really is going to have massive impacts on businesses from a productivity and a profitability point of view. So I think that's very interesting what you say there. What about delivery? Everybody have talked about delivery in this, and the takeout market has exploded during this time. Is that, in your view, and what you see with your customers, that, of course, we are in a second lockdown here in the UK and many other places in the world, and that, of course, increases delivery. Do you think that's going to continue in the same levels on the other side, or will that find a way to mature as well?
I think that no doubt that it'll find a way to mature. I think that the nature of our industry, I think that, and the aspect that I know I miss, and I know a lot of kind of customers miss, is part of going out and eating is the environment, is the interaction with the staff, is the environment you're in when you're having a drink or when you're eating. And I think that there's a significant amount of people missing that, and I think that once, and we talk about recovery, but once we get to a point where, we're in a place where we can open for in-store to trade, and we can also service all those other channels, I think it's one where, restaurants and bars, etc., are going to have to kind of make the decisions on, kind of how they and prioritize and ultimately think about how they are going to operate. I think there'll still be a place for delivery. Absolutely. I think, it's not going to go away. People, like being able to, not only go out, but also experience their favorite food at home as well. So I think that there will be a shift. I think that there could be a disrupting of the disruptors. I think there'll be a shakedown of delivery. I think, maybe we'll see aggregators merge. Maybe, operators will start exploring the last mile services, driving back to the brand. I think there's lots of things that are going to come out, but I do feel that, as an industry, I think people are, I think, and I I don't want to give a point in time, but I do think that there will be a desire to kind of get back out. And I think that's going to be the interesting aspect. And as a technology provider, we need to make sure that, what we're providing enables our customers to kind of serve wherever that goes and be able to provide a point of service kind of set of tools as opposed to just a point of sale set of tools.
And that leads very well into the next thing I would like to ask you, Mark, because if you had a crystal ball and you had to predict a bit about how the industry looks in 12 to 18 months from here, because already now that's happened more the last 6 months, that's happened maybe even in the last 2 decades, I would say. Which means that we are moving so progressively fast, and there's of course a lot of casualties within that. But how is the high street looking, and how is the restaurant one, hospitality world looking after this shakedown or pandemic explosion? Call it what you want, because it's really going fast now, because we are in maybe in the toughest winter in many ways.
I think that if you ever find that crystal ball, I'd love to get a look into it, Michael, if you ever come across it. But I think that from a kind of thoughts process, I think that there is going to be perhaps a drive towards localization. I think that what we've seen is, again, going back to the loyalty question. I think and the whole kind of a bit more working from home. When we get back, who's to say that people will get back to that 5 days a week, going to the office. So I think that there'll be a lot more kind of localization where, the destinations of like a London, for example, might not be day to day. They might be once or twice a week. And then, for the rest of it, it might be much more localized. So I think that's definitely will be an interesting to kind of, see where that pans out. I think, people are going to, I think there's more appetite to source ingredients, locally. So I think that there's that kind of warming to, to helping your local communities and your local restaurants, but still there is going to be that, still that draw to destinations, but might not be as frequent. So I think that's kind of the first thing I would say. I think, we talk a lot about virtual kitchens or dark kitchens, or I've seen a number of terms that kind of have been used for that. Are we going to get to a stage where we have potentially kind of, much, food trucks, for example, an explosion in that area? Who knows? But I think what we're trying to do is kind of figure that out, at the moment, so that we can build technology to kind of support those things. I think that the question that I think will be interesting is, if in 2 years we're kind of, we go back to, our old ways, or whether, it will continue, in a world that we're seeing today.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You mentioned food trucks. One of the things I've seen as well is that suddenly it's allowed again to operate from a hole in a wall almost. You can come out with a concept now without you have to have everything perfectly done, because people accept a bit more that you're trying as a new in the class, or maybe you're launching that concept you always dreamed about, and this is maybe the time where there's some really interesting concept that's gonna evolve out of this. You mentioned, virtual kitchens or food trucks. I think there's going to come some really interesting things myself out of that world. We don't know about yet who they are, but they, in 10 years time, they came out of this crisis because they got an opportunity to step into the market.
Yeah, and I think for operators, it's going to be that the key for them is going to be, working out, what is a fad and what isn't, right? Because people are going to, want to be agile, and they're going to want to try and do, different things, and that's great. But I think it's the investment, the energy, the time that goes into exploring one of those things is significant, and I think that it's important to kind of evaluate those things whilst being agile, which, don't often go hand in hand, because evaluation, if you're doing it, sometimes takes, longer than we'd like. So I think it's important for, our industry to kind of, explore where it makes sense. But if there's, kind of quickly tick off those that are fads and are not going to kind of help.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. But also, this is the time to test things, but then very quickly also, find out if this actually works for you, because it works for the neighbors doesn't mean it works for you and your concept. And I think that there's a lot of I've seen a lot of what I call, when you see 5-year-old boys play or girls play football, they all run to the same corner with the ball. And then we have to be very careful that we don't think we can just copy what others do. We need to test things within our business models and then evaluate if it actually works for us, and we're actually getting that return we need. And if don't, then start trying to do something else, because it's not going to work with just putting grit into it. And I think this is a great environment to test things you wouldn't have tested, pre-pandemic. So I think as long as you have that view on it. In the end of the podcast, Mark, we always ask for some advice for the industry out there, for leaders out there, how they can navigate it. From you, what you have experienced yourself as a leader and what you're going through right now, what would you be your top 3 advice to people out there?
Great one to finish on. So I think first and foremost, Mark, I think it's critically important to consider where the market is going, and ultimately positioning yourself accordingly and consistently in what you're doing. I think it's embracing, points of service and not points of sale necessarily. And making sure that you're set up and how you're going to maintain it. So that'll be kind of the first thing. I think the second piece is basically, think how about you're going to, do front and back house operations. Given about, where we know the market is going, do you have the right technology, but also the people and process to optimize the customer experience, right? I think that would be, the second. And then I think, lastly, what we've seen, and we do have a good advantage within our customer base, is that whilst obviously the natural thought, and it is that, it's been really challenging out there, what we have seen in our data is that there is some, characteristics that from customers that they're getting back to growth very quickly. And so I think we're all trying to have that level of optimism to get back our industry to the levels that we know we want it to. And so I think, really kind of summing that piece up, it's establish a technology strategy that supports agility. And I kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier, but ultimately, it's important that you align, that element, the strategy of what you're going to try and do, but making sure that you can be agile about it.
Great advice, Mark. And positioning is so important in this. If it's from the top of your business and the direction you're setting in it, and also being able of communicating that through the organization, and also, as you say again, also make sure that the infrastructure follows that. And then that's where technology maybe can put some agility, as you say, into changing your business model. How do you actually, not because technology take over everything, but it can actually help you build that infrastructure so you can make this change quicker. And then, of course, we have to look on the bright side of things. There's an end to everything when you walk through it. There will be another side of this. And it's about what you do in this period, probably, that you can see the multiple impact of afterwards. I think brilliant advice, Mark. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights and knowledge, sending you and your team at Oracle all the power and energy you need to thrive and survive in the new paradigm.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Michael. It's been been a delight to talk to you. And as you say, we're all focused, here at Oracle Food and Beverage on doing what we can and playing our part in this drive back to getting our industry back to where we all want it to be.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and thinking on digital transformation. Some great best practices and ideas on how to implement tech better and faster. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to our community and download free leadership tools at hospitalitymavericks.com. Please also join the Game Changer Facebook group if you want to be on the forefront of what progressive leaders are up to in the hospitality industry. If you did not get all of this, don't worry, there will be links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and be Maverick.